What's up, 360? Happy Monday. It was great to see many of you at 360 Zoom last night at 6:30 p.m. We'll be back next week, April 26th, and welcome to a brand new week of some Covideo Devos. And so if you're watching this today, I hope you find this encouraging and helpful. We're looking through the book of Hebrews, and we've been doing so all of last week, and we're going to continue to do it in this week. So these are just simple little musings, little thoughts on the book of Hebrews, and today we're going to look at chapter 3, starting at verse 15, and go through chapter 4, verse 2. So I'm going to read a little bit. It says, as has just been said, verse 15 of chapter 3, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did in the rebellion. Who were they who heard and rebelled? Were they not all those Moses led out of Egypt? And with whom was he angry for 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose bodies fell in the desert? And to whom did God swear that they would never enter his rest, if not those who disobeyed? So we see that they were unable to enter because of their unbelief. So the author is quoting some scripture from the Old Testament. And as he's talking here, he's reminding his audience of a story that they should be very familiar with. And it is the story of those in the book of Exodus who were led out of Egypt, and God had given them some commands and some of those and a direction. And he said, hey, I'm giving you this land. And essentially many of those people rejected it. The majority of them who were adults rejected it. They said, no, we don't trust you. We don't believe that you will actually do as you have promised. And they forfeited the ability to enter into the promised land. And the author of Hebrews is basically laying it out to them. He said the message that they were given was like a gospel, right? And because they didn't trust God, they rejected him and weren't able to enter into the land that God had promised, and that their ancestors had been waiting for. Their children were able to inherit it after a certain time, but as you recall, they wandered in the desert for about 40 years, unable to enter into the promised land. And the author of Hebrews is comparing this message to the message of Jesus, the gospel. And he says this, he says, therefore, since the promise, this is chapter 4, verse 2, the promise of entering his rest still stands, let us be careful that none of you be found to have fallen short of it. For we also have had the gospel preached to us, just as they did. But the message they heard was of no value to them, because those who heard did not combine it with faith. So just this idea of hearing the message, and Hebrews is often a little bit, scholars and people who study the Bible kind of debate on whether or not there are people who can embrace the message and be saved, and then later on reject the message and basically lose their salvation. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But what I love, the encouragement of that passage is that, one, there is a rest. There is a promised rest, and restoration is how I would understand it. That God's rest is this restorative rest, that God has a plan for you, that he wants to restore your heart. He wants to restore your purpose, your spirit, your mind. And he promises that through Jesus. But the author of Hebrews says, hey, don't be like the people. Don't be like your ancestors who rejected that message and therefore did not enter the rest or experience the rest that was promised. Hear the message and respond with faith that God is a good God, that he has done a great work in Jesus. And by believing and trusting in that message and persevering to the end, you will experience the rest and salvation. And so that's what I want to encourage you guys in today. Check out the passage for yourself, and we'll see you tomorrow.